Okay, everyone, to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff Tip. Actually, it's a pretty special episode for you guys, really showcasing two of the best modern kind of mid-size Seiko divers that are on the market today. Both of which have been recently featured in full dedicated review video. So if you're looking for, down into the dirt details, definitely check out those links. I will leave them down at the end of this video for you to click on. But here, really, this video is meant to just kind of showcase two options for those of you who maybe like the Seiko brand, but maybe haven't necessarily partaken just because of the size of their watches. And yes, they're known for watches that were much smaller than their ultimate, measurements might actually imply. But at the end of the day, yeah, they are quite large for the most part, and I own quite a few of them, and I tell you what, their smaller offerings are few and far between. So when I do find something that I think really fits within that space, of course, I'm really happy to kind of bring it to the masses with all of you. These are on really opposite ends of the spectrum, with the SJE101 Marinemaster on the right, with a full price of $2,800 MSRP, whereas this solar Prospex diver on the left is going to be $475 MSRP, although I did get it for quite a bit less from Sakura Watches. I'll also leave a link there, under $300 at $296. And then that's comparing it to a watch that's just under $3,000 at a $2,800. But of course, I got that from Belmont Watches, which they gave me an amazing deal as well on that. So one of the nice things is, you don't necessarily have to pay full retail with Seiko, because they do have a wonderful dealer network that's out there, whether you're going to go by, gray market or from an AD or brick and mortar or online. You're going to have quite a few different options. So big shout out to Belmont Watches for actually sponsoring this episode, so that we can kind of just showcase to you guys these options. And yeah, not everybody has a big old wrist. It doesn't mean that they don't want to enjoy a very robust professional diver. So with that said, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. You're never just buying a watch, you're buying the seller too. Well, here's a seller I can absolutely recommend. Belmont Watches in San Diego. Adam and Anthony are the real deal, true collectors with an enthusiast's eye. Check out their well-curated and regularly updated selection at belmontwatches.com. Follow along for weekly drops, and if you don't see something you like, reach out and connect. They might just have a lead on one of your own Grail watches. I've personally purchased both new and used from them, and even used their servicing and repair network. From new releases to vintage references and everything in between, whether niche independence or the horological holy trinity, Belmont has you covered. With competitive pricing and quick shipping, you can enjoy a friction-free experience. So before your next big purchase, make sure to check out Belmont Watches and tell them Mark sent you. All right, another big shout out to Belmont Watches for sponsoring this particular episode. And again, guys, these are at pretty far opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of their price point. So they're really not necessarily marketed towards the same buyer. And the goal here isn't to try to compare and contrast, hey, which one is right for you. It's just really to showcase two really niche options that offer a whole lot in terms of wearability. Of course, they're going to have a lot of those same tricks that Seiko is really known for in terms of their proportions and little wonderful details that help them wear better than their specs would imply. But here you're actually getting it all at a smaller scale, in general, so that it can be more wearable and more versatile, especially with a lot of the trends in terms of watches are going down in size. So these ones are, I'd say, a little bit ahead of the trend in terms of being able to offer you something that is really going to wear quite compact. And another thing that I like about these is neither of them really are relying on a purely vintage aesthetic. Yes, there are some vintage inspired elements, but these are both thoroughly modern watches. So when it comes to, this model here, this is the SBDN075. That's the JDM nomenclature, but it is also available internationally under the SNE573 nomenclature, which is, hey, it's a great watch. It actually comes on a rubber strap. I do have this paired to the excellent Uncle Straps, full steel Jubilee style bracelet, and I love it, guys. I have full review also on the channel. Look out for that as well. And I think it really helps it be a really cool and very clean kind of direct contemporary to this model here. And I'll try to stay out of some of the drama around the Marinemaster 200's release. There's a whole nother video for that. But in terms of looking at these side by side, they do have very similar dimensions, 38.5 millimeters in terms of the width on the cases, although you're going to get a little bit of overhang, as you guys can see here, in terms of that bezel. So this is going to be probably marketed more like a 39 and a half, but it's about 39.7 from the edge of that bezel. But again, the case with itself is closer to 38 and a half, and this is also similar story here, about 38 and a half. So it's going to wear really nicely. And you can see, although overall thinner at 10.6 millimeters versus 12.3, the mid cases themselves are actually quite comparable. The mid case on the mechanical is actually going to visually look thinner thanks to just the curvature there and then the high polished accent there, kind of setting up for that case back, which is a display case back, which is also a first. So for those of you that that's something that you love in a dive watch and you haven't been able to find in a Seiko before, this is the first Seiko to offer that. And what a great movement that it's showcasing in there with the 6L37, not to be mistaken with the 6R movements. The 6L, completely different echelon, more comparable to a top grade ETA 2892. Now here you're going to have something a little bit more versatile with that solar quartz. This is going to be their solar quartz caliber Victor 147 or V147 10-month power reserve on a full charge, plus or minus 15 seconds a month, versus this is going to be, I think, minus 10 to plus 15, which is actually a smaller tolerance. They just don't use some of the trickery that you'll find within Swiss movements, where they'll tell you, plus or minus 25 to plus or minus 12. It's like, that means really plus or minus 25. Like, what? Why even say the plus or minus 12? Like, it's just funny. And then, people will say that, Seiko needs to tighten their tolerances. They need to, well, you know what? They can't get COSC because Swiss only allows chronometers to be Swiss watches, because brands like Seiko were, kind of destroying them for accuracy years ago. So, it's just one of those things. They're not trying to oversell, or overpromise and underdeliver. It's really always the other way around with Seiko. So, these are going to tell the time that you're going to need. And honestly, as a watch enthusiast, you're surrounded by atomic time everywhere. If you have your phone in your pocket or a G-Shock handy. So, ultimate, spec, you're not going to be worried, too drastically or dramatically in terms of the variance after a day or two. So, in terms of the way these wear, they're actually going to wear pretty similar. So let's actually get them on the wrist and showcase that aspect. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears really beautifully. Check that out. Look at how flat that lays. I like that the bezel, it is definitely quite well defined, to where you can see that it is quite different and compartmentalized against that case versus flowing into the case. It just does help to visually just accentuate how thin that mid case is. Wow, really fantastic. Then on the other side, a bit of a different story here. You're going to see a bit more of an integrated style in terms of the way that the bezel slopes and kind of follows the lines of the case very, very smoothly there. And then, a little bit more action, a little bit more curvature on there, more attention to detail in terms of that beveling there. My goodness, that is a looker. But overall, guys, right, it's a pretty similar kind of story, right? Thin, small, very articulated bracelet, nice, a little bit of play there, whether it be on, you know, kind of the polished surfaces or some of the really cool contouring you're going to see. This one's going to be a little bit more traditional, but, you know, maybe a little bit more generic and vanilla in some people's eyes, but I think it looks absolutely great. And of course, if I do get the wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to get some perspective distortion. It's going to make the watch feel a little bit bigger than it is. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame here so you guys can still get a detailed look, but maybe just in a little bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And check that out. Ooh. My goodness, the thinness there is just something special, guys. And I really appreciate that so much. Check that out. I mean, especially right now, winter time frame, you're wearing flannels, long sleeves, you're wearing jackets, stuff like that. This sliding underneath the cuff, it's just so valuable and definitely underappreciated a lot of the times. And something you don't always find with a Seiko diver, but here you have two really slick, svelte Seiko diving options that are absolutely going to be able to slide under that cuff and really give you a whole lot of pleasure. So with that said, let's actually get these off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Guys, as you can see, really, really outstanding Lume. Ooh, look at that. It's LumeBright, guys. Of course, one is going to be more thickly applied, and wouldn't you guess, it's the more expensive one. But at the end of the day, it's a strong compound, so it's going to be really giving you functionally all the lume that you're ever going to need. Now, one thing I always like to work in, though, is a bit of low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And you guys can see pretty clearly here, there's going to be one that's going to have a lot more light play versus the other. And that's going to be the Marinemaster 200. There's a lot more complexity. There's more texturing. You know, there's more of a mix of finishes there with a lot of high polish playing off of some really nice satin brushing, versus here you're going to have on the Seiko Solar. The nice thing is you're going to have a bit of a better contrast, right? Because it's going to be pretty much a black dial, matte black at that. And then, you know, even comparing the bezel inserts, although they're both steel, one has a beautiful high gloss lacquer and the other one has a really beautiful DLC coating that actually shows you the texturing done around the ring, which actually does give you a bit of light play as well, just in a really different way. You guys can see one a little bit more sedate, one a little bit more dynamic. So that's going to be kind of the tale of these two. If you want something that's really going to be a little bit more fun and stand out versus something that's going to be just a little bit more versatile and, you know, ultimately, you know, maybe a little bit boring. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with wanting something that's just going to not necessarily jump right off your wrist, something that's just going to kind of conform to it and kind of blend in, right? But as a watch enthusiast, you know, a lot of times we like to highlight our timepieces. So it's nice to have something worth highlighting by really seeing Seiko as a brand challenge themselves in ways that you just, you know, aren't used to seeing. So I'm really digging that. Now, again, guys, I don't think anybody's going to be cross-shopping these two models, but I think people who maybe have held off on buying Seiko could really be lured in by either of them, whether it be on something more as a kind of daily, sporty, you know, reliable solar quartz model, or something in terms of being that really kind of high attention to detail, high complexity, high execution, high level professional diver, right? They definitely both have different levels of competition at these price points. Seiko, you know, with the solar side is going to be competing with a bevy of other watches, whether they be mechanical or quartz. But those are going to be more kind of function forward, whereas the Marinemaster 200 is going to be, you know, I'd say deadly, you know, kind of square looking at that mid-tier Swiss, you know, variation. So, I mean, you lay this next to a Tag Heuer Aqua Racer 200 and they're going to have very, very close specs. Whereas I think that the Seiko still offers a ton of value, you know, mainly from being fully in-house down to the, you know, down to the jewels, down to the mainspring, to the lubricants, you know, used within the watch. So that's something that you get. And, you know, of course, Seiko's history within the dive watch genre is something that is, you know, nothing to kind of scoff at. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. I think these are two really great options for those of you with smaller wrists, or those of you that are just maybe looking for something that wears a little bit smaller, a little bit more classically sized, and that, you know, would now be more within the kind of mid-sized, you know, kind of category, but traditionally that would be like a nice full-size diver way back when, right? So within that vein, but you're wanting something maybe a little bit more robust, something a little bit more contemporary and, you know, and modern, versus just something that is just a flat out one-for-one kind of recreation or dedication to a vintage aesthetic from days gone by. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. And one more huge shout out to Belmont Watches for sponsoring this particular segment. Thanks, guys.